Welcome to the Numis Explorer, where ordinary coins can turn into extraordinary discoveries, and today we are taking a fascinating look at the 1985 Washington quarter dollar, a coin that has attracted attention from collectors because unusual errors, striking mistakes, varieties, and exceptional condition can sometimes make an otherwise common coin surprisingly desirable. You may have heard dramatic claims that a 1985 quarter could be worth as much as $160 million, but before believing a headline like that, remember that an extraordinary price would require extraordinary evidence, such as a major authenticated mint error, an extremely rare variety, exceptional preservation, documented provenance, and strong demand from serious collectors. The 1985 quarter was produced at the Denver Mint and normally carries the D Mint mark, but the real excitement begins when a coin shows something that should not have happened during the manufacturing process. Collectors carefully examine these coins for off-center strikes, doubled design elements, die cracks, die breaks, broad strikes, clipped planchets, struck-through errors, missing or distorted details, and other abnormalities that can separate an unusual example from millions of ordinary pieces. An off-center strike occurs when the blank planchet is not positioned correctly between the dies, leaving part of the design shifted toward the edge. The greater the displacement while the date and mint mark remain visible, the more interesting the coin may become. A broad strike can happen when the collar that normally contains the planchet fails to function correctly, allowing the coin to spread outward during striking and creating an unusual shape. A clipped planchet is another possibility collectors watch for, where a portion of the metal blank is missing before the coin is struck, producing a characteristic curved or straight missing section. Die cracks and die breaks can also create raised lines, lumps, or other unusual features on the quarter, and if a die progressively deteriorated, multiple coins carrying the same unusual characteristic may exist. Another area of interest is double die characteristics, although collectors need to distinguish genuine hub doubling from ordinary machine doubling, die deterioration, damage, or post-mint wear. A genuine double die variety can show noticeable separation or doubling on specific letters, numbers, or design elements, and authentication is especially important when a coin is being promoted as extremely valuable. There is also the possibility of a wrong planchet error, where a quarter is accidentally struck on a blank intended for another denomination or another type of coin. Such errors are rare and can be especially fascinating because the coin's weight, diameter, thickness, metal composition, and design can provide clues about what happened at the mint. A 1985 quarter with an unusual weight should therefore not automatically be declared a $1 million discovery, because dirt, corrosion, damage, altered surfaces, or inaccurate household scales can create misleading results. Serious collectors use precise measurements and professional examination to determine whether an unusual coin is genuinely mint-made. Another possibility is a double strike, where the coin is struck more than once, sometimes with the second impression visibly shifted from the first. If the second strike creates dramatic overlapping details while preserving important identifying features, the result can be highly collectible. A struck-through error can occur when a foreign substance becomes trapped between the die and planchet, leaving missing or weakened design details. Some examples can look like damage to an inexperienced observer, which is why studying the coin's surface, shape, texture, and overall pattern is so important. Condition is another major factor. A heavily circulated 1985 quarter with scratches, stains, dents, and worn details generally has a very different collectible profile from a sharply preserved example with strong luster and minimal contact marks. Coins that survive decades with exceptional surfaces can attract greater interest, especially when combined with a genuine and desirable mint error. Collectors also examine the edge of the quarter because unusual edge characteristics can sometimes provide important clues. A normal Washington quarter should have the expected copper-nickel-clad construction and edge appearance for its period, while an unusual edge, unexpected color, or strange metal exposure can prompt further investigation. However, discoloration alone is not proof of an error, because environmental exposure and chemical reactions can change the appearance of a coin after it leaves the mint. This is why the phrase, $160 million quarter, should be treated as a dramatic possibility or headline claim rather than a guaranteed market value. There is no reason to assume that every 1985D quarter is worth millions, and most ordinary examples are not. The exciting part of coin collecting is that you do not need every coin to be valuable, you only need to recognize the unusual one when it appears. If you have a 1985D quarter in an old collection, inherited coin jar, bank roll, or box of loose change, start by checking the date and mint mark, then examine both sides under good lighting. Look closely at the lettering, numbers, portrait, eagle, rim, and edge, searching for genuine abnormalities rather than scratches or damage created after minting. Compare the coin with a normal 1985D quarter whenever possible, because comparison can make unusual characteristics much easier to identify. Check the weight with an accurate digital scale, measure the diameter if you have suitable equipment, and avoid cleaning or polishing the coin because cleaning can permanently reduce collector appeal and may remove evidence useful to an expert. If you believe you have a significant mint error, professional authentication from a reputable numismatic grading or authentication service can be extremely important. A spectacular claim about a $160 million value should never be accepted simply because it appears in a social media post, video title, or online listing. Actual prices depend on authentication, rarity, condition, market demand, auction competition, and documented sales. The most valuable discoveries are usually supported by evidence rather than hype. That is exactly what makes the 1985D quarter such an interesting subject for treasure hunters. An ordinary-looking coin can inspire a closer examination, and a genuine mint error can transform its collectible story. Imagine finding a quarter that looks normal at first glance, only to discover that the design is dramatically off-center, the planchet has an authentic clip, the coin was struck on the wrong metal, or a rare double die characteristic appears under magnification. Those possibilities are what keep collectors searching through old change and forgotten collections. So before spending an unusual 1985D quarter, take a moment to inspect it carefully. Look at the date, mint mark, lettering, rim, strike, surfaces, and edge, and remember that real rarity must be proven. The dream of discovering a spectacular error coin is one of the reasons numismatics remains so exciting, because history can sometimes hide in the smallest pieces of metal. If you enjoy learning about rare American coins, unusual mint mistakes, valuable varieties, and the stories behind fascinating discoveries, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the Numis Explorer, and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next coin treasure hunt. And if you have a 1985D quarter that looks unusual, share what you notice in the comments, because your everyday pocket change might contain a story worth investigating, even if the real value turns out to be far different from the sensational $160 million claim. Next 1980p $quarter coin. Today we are taking a fascinating journey into the world of the 1980p Washington quarter dollar, a coin that may look completely ordinary at first glance but can become extremely interesting when unusual mint errors, striking mistakes, rare varieties, exceptional condition, or other remarkable characteristics are discovered. You may have seen sensational claims suggesting that a 1980p quarter dollar could be worth as much as $155 million because of errors and mistakes, and while such a figure should never be treated as a guaranteed value for an ordinary coin, the idea points towards something that makes coin collecting so exciting. A rare and properly authenticated mint error can sometimes be worth dramatically more than its face value. The real question is not whether every 1980p quarter is worth millions, because it certainly is not, but whether a particular example contains a genuine mint-made mistake that separates it from the enormous number of normal quarters produced during that era. That is where careful examination, knowledge, authentication, condition, rarity, and collector demand become incredibly important. The 1980p quarter was struck at the Philadelphia Mint and carries the P mint mark, making it easy to identify when you know where to look, but the mint mark alone does not make the coin rare. What can make an individual example fascinating is an unusual event that occurred during the preparation of the planchet, the creation of the dies, or the striking process. One of the first possibilities collectors examine is an off-center strike. During normal production, the blank planchet must be positioned correctly between the dies before enormous pressure brings the designs onto the metal. If the planchet shifts before or during striking, the design can become noticeably displaced toward one side, leaving part of the blank without the expected design. A dramatic off-center strike can be particularly desirable when the date remains visible, because the date allows the coin to be identified and authenticated more easily. The greater the genuine displacement and the more dramatic the error, the more attention the coin may receive from collectors. Another fascinating possibility is a broad strike. A quarter is normally contained by a collar during striking, helping establish its proper diameter and shape. If that collar fails to function correctly, the metal can spread outward beyond the normal boundaries, producing a broad or expanded appearance. A genuine broad strike can look very different from a damaged coin, but collectors must carefully distinguish a mint-made error from post-mint damage caused by pressure, machines, tools, or other objects. The edge of the coin can provide useful evidence because an authentic striking error often produces characteristics consistent with the way the metal flowed during the minting process. Another error collectors may investigate is a clipped planchet. Before a blank becomes a finished quarter, metal strips are punched to create planchets. If the punching process overlaps an earlier punched area or otherwise fails, the resulting blank can have a portion missing. When that defective blank is later struck, the finished quarter may show a curved or straight clip along its edge. The shape, location, and physical characteristics of the missing section can help specialists determine whether the clip is genuine or simply damage that occurred after the coin entered circulation. A genuine clipped planchet 1980p quarter could be an exciting addition to an error collection, especially if the error is dramatic and the coin remains in strong condition. Another possibility is a die crack or die break. Coin dies experience enormous pressure and repeated use, and over time they can develop cracks or breaks. When a cracked die strikes a coin, the crack can appear as a raised line on the finished piece. As the die deteriorates further, the crack can become more prominent, and a major die break may create a raised blob or unusual distortion in part of the design. Collectors sometimes become fascinated by these progressive die stages because they can document the life of a particular die. If a distinctive die crack appears on multiple coins, specialists may compare examples to understand how the error developed over time. However, not every raised line is a valuable die crack. Scratches, gouges, corrosion, plating problems, and other forms of damage can create confusing features, which is why experienced collectors study the direction, shape, texture, and relationship of the anomaly to the rest of the design. Double die characteristics are another subject that can attract tremendous attention. A genuine double die originates during the die making process and can create visible separation or doubling on portions of the design. Collectors may examine letters, numbers, and other design elements for unusual secondary images. However, it is extremely important to distinguish genuine hub doubling from machine doubling, die deterioration, strike-related distortion, or simple damage. A coin that appears doubled under casual observation is not automatically a valuable double die. Proper attribution and authentication are essential, especially when someone claims that an ordinary-looking quarter is worth an extraordinary amount of money. The possibility of a double strike can also make a 1980p quarter interesting. In a normal production process, the coin receives the intended strike and moves away from the striking area. If the coin remains in the press and is struck again, the second impression may overlap the first. Depending on the circumstances, the result can show duplicated or shifted portions of the design. Dramatic double strikes can be highly collectible because they provide visible evidence of an unusual event during production. Another possibility is a struck-through error. This occurs when some foreign material or mint-related debris comes between the die and planchet during striking. The material can prevent part of the design from being fully impressed, leaving an area that appears weak, missing, recessed, or strangely textured. The exact appearance can vary greatly depending on what came between the die and the coin and how it interacted with the striking process. A struck-through quarter can therefore become an interesting conversation piece for collectors, but once again, authentication matters because scratches and post-mint damage can imitate some of these effects. One of the most dramatic possibilities would be a wrong planchet error. The planchet is the blank piece of metal prepared for striking, and if a quarter design is accidentally struck on a planchet intended for another denomination or another coin type, the result can be highly unusual. The weight, diameter, thickness, edge, and metal composition can provide important evidence. If someone finds a 1980p quarter that weighs significantly different from a normal example, that could justify further investigation, but a different weight does not automatically prove a wrong planchet error. Dirt, corrosion, wear, damage, scale inaccuracies, or other factors can affect measurements. Serious collectors use precise equipment and compare the coin against known standards before reaching a conclusion. Another area worth examining is the rim. A normal quarter should have a consistent relationship between the design and outer edge, but errors involving the collar, planchet, or striking pressure can sometimes produce unusual rims. A partial collar error, for example, can occur when the collar does not properly surround the planchet during striking. This may result in a coin with an unusual edge profile or an area where the metal expands in a distinctive way. Such coins can be visually dramatic and are often attractive to collectors because the error can be understood simply by looking at the physical shape of the coin. The condition of the 1980p quarter is another major factor. A coin that spent decades in circulation may have scratches, dents, discoloration, flattened details, and other signs of wear. By contrast, an example that remained protected and retained strong original surfaces can be much more appealing. When an important error is combined with exceptional preservation, collector interest can rise significantly. That does not mean every uncirculated quarter is automatically rare, but condition can make a major difference when comparing otherwise similar pieces. Collectors may also look for strong strikes, attractive surfaces, minimal contact marks, and original luster. Color and appearance can provide clues, but unusual color alone should never be mistaken for proof of a mint error. Environmental exposure, chemicals, heat, cleaning, and other post-mint factors can dramatically alter a coin's appearance. A copper-colored area on a clad quarter, for example, might have a completely different explanation from a genuine planchet or striking error. This is why careful examination is more valuable than simply chasing dramatic claims. If you own a 1980p quarter, one of the best things you can do is avoid cleaning it. Cleaning, polishing, scratching, or attempting to improve the appearance can reduce collector appeal and potentially destroy evidence that specialists could use to evaluate the coin. Instead, handle it carefully by the edges and examine it under good lighting. Compare both sides with a normal 1980p quarter. Check whether the date is correctly positioned, whether the P mint mark appears normal, whether the lettering and numbers show unusual doubling, whether the rim is complete, whether the edge looks normal, and whether the weight and dimensions match expected specifications. Next, 1990p $quarter coin. Today we are taking a closer look at the 1990p Washington $quarter, a coin that may appear completely normal at first glance but can become highly interesting when genuine mint errors, unusual varieties, striking mistakes, or exceptional condition are involved. You may have heard dramatic claims that a 1990p $quarter could be worth as much as $150 million because of its errors and mistakes. But it is important to understand that such a figure is not a guaranteed value for an ordinary 1990p quarter and should be treated as a sensational possibility rather than an established market price unless supported by extraordinary authentication and documented sales. The real excitement comes from understanding what could make a particular 1990p quarter different from the millions of normal coins produced during its era. The 1990p quarter was struck at the Philadelphia Mint and carries the P mint mark, and collectors may examine these coins for unusual characteristics created during the minting process. One of the most exciting possibilities is an off-center strike, which can happen when a planchet is not properly positioned between the dies. Instead of the Washington design appearing perfectly centered, part of the design can be shifted toward the edge, sometimes leaving a large blank area on one side. Dramatic off-center strikes can attract collector attention, particularly when the date and mint mark remain visible. Another possibility is a broad strike, which can occur when the collar surrounding the planchet does not properly contain the metal during striking. The metal may spread beyond its normal dimensions, creating an unusually wide or distorted coin. Collectors also examine the rim because genuine mint errors often produce physical characteristics that are difficult to reproduce through ordinary damage. A clipped planchet is another error worth understanding. Before a blank becomes a quarter, metal strips are punched to create planchets. If the punching process overlaps a previous hole or something goes wrong during preparation, a section of the blank can be missing. When the defective blank is struck, the finished coin may show a curved or straight clip along the edge. A genuine clipped planchet error can be collectible, but collectors must distinguish it from damage that happened after the coin left the mint. Another fascinating possibility involves double die characteristics. Genuine double dies are created during the die-making process and can result in noticeable separation or doubling on portions of the design. Collectors may inspect lettering, numbers, and other details for unusual secondary impressions. However, not every apparent doubling is valuable. Machine doubling, die deterioration, strike distortion, scratches, and post-mint damage can create appearances that resemble doubling. This is why authentication and comparison with known examples are so important. A dramatic-looking coin may attract attention online, but true rarity needs evidence. Die cracks and die breaks are also possible sources of collectible interest. Coin dies are subjected to tremendous pressure during production, and over time they can develop cracks or breaks. When a damaged die strikes a coin, the crack may appear as a raised line on the surface. A larger die break can create a raised lump or distorted section of the design. If a distinctive die characteristic appears on multiple examples, collectors can sometimes study those coins as part of a progression showing how the die changed during its working life. A 1990p quarter with a major and clearly identifiable die break could be far more interesting than an ordinary circulated coin, although the value would depend on the size, location, rarity, condition, and collector demand. Another possibility is a double strike. Normally, a quarter receives one intended strike before leaving the press, but if a coin remains in position and is struck again, the second impression can create overlapping or shifted design elements. A dramatic double strike can be visually impressive and may become a desirable error coin when the evidence clearly demonstrates that the extra impression happened during minting. Struck-through errors are another category collectors may investigate. These can happen when foreign material or mint-related debris comes between the die and planchet during striking, preventing part of the design from being transferred normally. The resulting coin can have an area with missing, weak, or distorted details. Because post-mint scratches and damage can sometimes imitate struck-through errors, specialists examine the surface and shape carefully before confirming anything. Perhaps one of the most dramatic possibilities would be a wrong planchet error, where a quarter design is accidentally struck on a blank intended for a different denomination or coin type. Such a coin could have an unusual weight, diameter, thickness, edge, or metal composition. If you own a 1990p quarter that seems unusually light or heavy, that does not automatically mean you have a rare wrong planchet error. A household scale may be inaccurate, dirt or corrosion can affect measurements, and damage can alter a coin's physical characteristics. Serious examination requires accurate equipment and comparison with established specifications. The edge of the quarter can also provide valuable clues. Collectors may look for unusual edge shapes, missing or distorted reading, abnormal metal exposure, or other characteristics associated with striking problems. A partial collar error, for example, can occur when the collar does not properly contain the planchet during striking, producing an unusual edge or raised section. Such errors can be fascinating because the physical shape of the coin can reveal something about the machinery involved in its production. Condition is another major factor that can influence collector interest. A heavily circulated 1990p quarter may have scratches, dents, flattened details, discoloration, and other signs of decades of use. An example preserved in exceptional condition can be much more attractive, particularly when paired with a genuine mint error. Strong original luster, sharp details, minimal contact marks, and clean surfaces can all contribute to desirability, although condition alone does not transform an ordinary coin into a multi-million-dollar rarity. Collectors also need to understand the difference between an error and damage. A coin can become bent, scratched, gouged, chemically discolored, flattened, or altered after leaving the mint, and these conditions generally do not carry the same value as genuine mint errors. For example, a coin that has been squeezed in a machine or struck by another object may appear dramatically distorted, but that does not mean the distortion happened at the mint. Genuine mint errors usually show evidence consistent with the manufacturing process. That is why careful comparison and professional attribution are so important. If you discover a 1990p quarter that appears unusual, avoid cleaning or polishing it. Cleaning can damage the original surface and potentially reduce its numismatic desirability. Instead, handle the coin carefully by its edges and examine it under good lighting. Look at both sides, check the date and P mint mark, inspect the lettering and numbers, study the rim, examine the edge, and compare the coin with a normal 1990p quarter. If the coin has unusual doubling, an off-center design, a missing section, a strange edge, a major die crack, an unexpected metal appearance, or another unusual characteristic, document what you see without altering the coin. Professional grading and authentication can provide a much stronger basis for determining whether the feature is genuine. This becomes especially important when a claim involves an enormous number such as $150 million. A seller can place any price on an online listing, but an asking price is not the same thing as a confirmed sale. Actual numismatic value depends on rarity, authenticity, condition, demand, provenance, auction competition, and documented market evidence. A truly extraordinary 1990p quarter would need extraordinary proof before a value anywhere near $150 million could be taken seriously. Nevertheless, the possibility of a remarkable error is exactly what makes coin hunting so exciting. Imagine searching through an old collection and discovering a quarter with a dramatic off-center strike, a genuine double die characteristic, a major die break, a spectacular clipped planchet, a broad strike, a double strike, or an authentic wrong planchet error. Each one tells a different story about how the coin was made and what went wrong during production. The fascinating part is that most people may never notice these differences. They might see a quarter, recognize Washington on the front, see the eagle on the reverse, and spend the coin without a second thought. A collector, however, may pause and examine the details. That extra moment of attention can reveal characteristics that ordinary users completely overlook. This is why knowledge is more valuable than hype. If you know what genuine errors look like, you are better prepared to recognize something unusual without immediately believing exaggerated claims. The 1990p quarter is therefore a perfect reminder to examine your coins carefully but realistically. Do not assume every strange-looking coin is rare, and do not assume every internet claim is accurate. Instead, next 1977 $quarter coin. Today we are taking a closer look at the 1977 Washington $quarter, a coin that may look like a simple piece of pocket change but can become extremely fascinating when genuine mint errors, unusual varieties, striking mistakes, or exceptional condition are involved. You may have heard dramatic claims that a 1977 $quarter could be worth as much as $145 million because of errors and mistakes, and while that kind of figure should never be treated as a guaranteed value for an ordinary 1977 quarter, it certainly creates an exciting reason to learn what kinds of unusual characteristics collectors actually search for. The important point is that most 1977 quarters are not worth millions, but a genuinely rare and properly authenticated mint error can be far more interesting and valuable than a normal example. The 1977 Washington quarter was produced during an important period in American coinage, and collectors today examine surviving examples for signs that something unusual happened during the preparation of the planchet, the creation of the dies, or the actual striking process. One of the first things worth checking is whether the coin has an off-center strike. During normal minting, a blank planchet must be positioned correctly between the dies, but if it shifts before or during the strike, the design can appear noticeably displaced. A dramatic off-center strike can leave a large portion of the planchet without the normal design while moving Washington's portrait, lettering, date, or reverse elements toward one side. The date is particularly important because it helps identify the coin, and an off-center error that still clearly shows the date can attract greater interest. Another possibility is a broad strike, which can occur when the collar that normally surrounds the planchet does not function correctly during striking. Without proper containment, the metal may spread outward, producing a coin that appears wider than normal and may have unusual rim characteristics. A genuine broad strike is different from a quarter that was damaged after leaving the mint, so careful examination is necessary. Collectors also watch for clipped planchets, which can occur when the metal strip used to produce blanks is punched incorrectly. If part of the planchet is missing before the quarter is struck, the finished coin can have a distinctive curved or straight clip along its edge. The shape and characteristics of the missing section can help specialists determine whether the clip happened during manufacturing or whether the coin was damaged later. Another exciting possibility involves double die characteristics. Collectors examine the lettering, numbers, and design elements for genuine separation or doubling that originated during the die-making process. However, not every coin with apparent doubling is a valuable double die. Machine doubling, die deterioration, strike distortion, scratches, and other forms of damage can create misleading appearances. This is why experienced collectors compare unusual coins with known examples and often seek professional attribution before making major claims about rarity or value. Die cracks and die breaks are also fascinating possibilities. The dies used to strike coins endure enormous pressure, and over time they can develop cracks. When a cracked die strikes a quarter, the resulting raised line may appear across part of the design. If the die deteriorates further, a larger die break can create a raised blob or unusual distortion. A major and clearly identifiable die break on a 1977 quarter could make the coin more interesting to specialists, especially if similar examples can be documented and connected to the same die. Another possibility is a double strike, where a coin receives more than one impression during the minting process. If the second strike occurs while the quarter is not correctly positioned, the design can appear duplicated, shifted, or overlapping. A dramatic double-struck quarter can be visually impressive and may attract collectors who specialize in mint errors. Struck-through errors are another category worth examining. These can occur when a foreign substance or mint-related debris becomes trapped between the die and the planchet, preventing the die from fully transferring part of its design. The finished coin may have an area where details appear weak, missing, recessed, or strangely textured. Because ordinary scratches and damage can sometimes imitate this appearance, specialists carefully inspect the surface before deciding whether the feature is genuinely mint-made. One of the most dramatic possibilities would be a wrong planchet error, where the Washington quarter design is accidentally struck on a blank intended for another denomination or coin type. Such a coin could have an unusual weight, diameter, thickness, edge, or metal composition. If you find a 1977 quarter that seems unusually light or heavy, do not immediately assume you have discovered a rare wrong planchet error. A scale can be inaccurate, dirt can affect weight, corrosion can alter surfaces, and damage can change the physical characteristics of a coin. Proper measurement with reliable equipment is essential. The edge of the quarter can also provide clues. Collectors may inspect it for unusual reading, abnormal metal exposure, an irregular edge, or characteristics associated with collar-related errors. A partial collar error can produce a distinctive shape when the collar does not properly contain the planchet during striking. Such errors can be especially interesting because the shape of the coin itself may reveal something about the machinery and striking process. Condition is another major consideration. A circulated 1977 quarter may have scratches, dents, wear, discoloration, and flattened details from years of use, while a better preserved example may retain sharper details and more attractive surfaces. When a rare error is combined with excellent condition, collector interest can increase considerably. However, condition by itself does not make an ordinary quarter worth millions. The real combination that collectors seek is genuine rarity plus strong preservation plus demand. It is also important to understand that unusual color does not automatically indicate a valuable mint error. Chemical exposure, environmental damage, cleaning, heat, and other post-mint factors can change a coin's appearance. Similarly, a bent or damaged quarter is not automatically a rare error simply because its shape looks strange. Genuine mint errors generally show physical evidence consistent with an event that occurred during production. This distinction is extremely important when evaluating a dramatic claim such as a $145 million quarter. An online seller can list a coin for an enormous amount, but an asking price is not proof that the coin has actually sold for that amount. Real numismatic value depends on authentication, rarity, condition, collector demand, provenance, and documented market results. A truly extraordinary valuation would require extraordinary evidence. Still, the possibility of discovering a significant error is what makes searching old coins so exciting. Imagine finding a 1977 quarter with a dramatic off-center strike where the date remains visible, or a major double die characteristic that can be confirmed by specialists, or a spectacular clipped planchet with clear mint-made characteristics. Imagine discovering a broad strike that is dramatically larger than normal, a double strike showing two distinct impressions, or a wrong planchet error with unusual composition and weight. Each of these possibilities would tell a fascinating story about what happened during the manufacturing process. That is why collectors often say that the real treasure is hidden in the details. Millions of people may have handled coins without ever examining them closely, but a knowledgeable collector knows that the smallest difference can sometimes deserve further investigation. If you have a 1977 quarter in an old collection, a jar of coins, a box of inherited change, or simply sitting in a drawer, start with the basics. Confirm the date and mint mark if present, examine both sides under good lighting, inspect the lettering and numbers for unusual characteristics, check the rim and edge, look for signs of an off-center strike, and compare the coin with an ordinary 1977 quarter. If you have access to a precise digital scale, check its weight and compare it with reliable specifications, but remember that weight alone cannot prove an error. Do not clean, polish, scratch, bend, or otherwise alter the coin because doing so can reduce its collectible appeal and destroy important evidence. If you discover something that genuinely looks unusual, consider having it examined by a reputable numismatic expert or professional authentication and grading service. That step can help separate a genuine mint error from damage or a normal production characteristic. The story of the supposed $145 million 1977 quarter should therefore be approached with excitement but also with realism. It is perfectly reasonable to investigate unusual coins, but it is not reasonable to assume that every quarter from the same year is worth a fortune. Coin collecting becomes much more rewarding when you understand why a coin is rare rather than simply believing a huge number attached to it. The date alone does not create the value, the specific variety, error, condition, authenticity, and market demand are what matter. This is what makes the 1977 quarter such an interesting last 1984 p quarter dollar coin. Today we are taking a closer look at the 1984 p Washington quarter dollar, a coin that may look like simple pocket change but can become a fascinating collectible when genuine mint errors, unusual varieties, striking mistakes, or exceptional condition are discovered. You may have heard dramatic claims that a 1984 p quarter dollar could be worth as much as $140 million because of errors and mistakes, but it is important to understand that such an enormous figure is not a guaranteed value for an ordinary 1984 p quarter and should be treated as a sensational claim unless supported by extraordinary authentication and documented market evidence. The real excitement is discovering what could make a particular 1984 p quarter different from normal examples. The 1984 p quarter was struck at the Philadelphia Mint and carries the P Mint mark, and collectors may carefully inspect these coins for unusual characteristics created during planchet preparation, die production, or the striking process. One of the most exciting possibilities is an off-center strike, which happens when the planchet is not positioned correctly between the dies. Instead of the Washington portrait and surrounding lettering appearing perfectly centered, the entire design can shift toward one side, sometimes leaving a large blank crescent of metal on the opposite side. A dramatic off-center strike can be especially interesting when the date and mint mark remain clearly visible, because those details help identify the coin. Another possibility is a broad strike, which can occur when the collar that normally holds the planchet in position fails during striking. Without proper containment, the metal can spread outward, creating an unusually wide or expanded quarter with distinctive rim characteristics. A genuine broadstrike is very different from a coin that was flattened or damaged after leaving the mint, so collectors look for evidence showing that the unusual shape was created during production. Clipped planchets are another fascinating possibility. Before a quarter becomes a finished coin, metal strips are punched to create individual blanks. If the punching process overlaps an earlier hole or something goes wrong during blank preparation, part of the planchet can be missing. When that defective blank is struck, the finished quarter may display a curved or straight missing section along its edge. Genuine clips can be collectible, but specialists carefully distinguish them from post-mint damage by studying the shape, metal flow, and other physical characteristics. Another area collectors examine is double die characteristics. A genuine double die originates during the die-making process and can produce visible separation or doubling on certain letters, numbers, or design details. However, this is an area where caution is essential because many coins that appear doubled are actually showing machine doubling, die deterioration, strike distortion, scratches, or other forms of damage. A genuine double die variety must be properly attributed before anyone can make a serious claim about rarity or value. Die cracks and die breaks are also possibilities worth investigating. Coin dies experience tremendous pressure during production, and repeated use can eventually cause cracks. When a cracked die strikes a coin, the crack may appear as a raised line across the design. As the die deteriorates, a larger break can create a raised lump or distorted area. A major and clearly identifiable die break on a 1984 P quarter could attract collector interest, especially if specialists can identify the same characteristic on other coins and establish its progression. Another possibility is a double strike, where a coin receives more than one impression during the minting process. If the second strike occurs after the coin has shifted position, portions of the design may appear duplicated, overlapping, or dramatically displaced. A strong double-struck quarter can be visually impressive and may be desirable to collectors because the error provides evidence of an unusual event inside the mint. Struck-through errors are another category worth understanding. These can happen when a foreign substance or mint-related debris becomes trapped between the die and the planchet, preventing part of the design from being fully transferred. The result can be an area with missing, weak, or distorted details. Since ordinary scratches and damage can imitate some struck-through characteristics, professional examination may be necessary to establish whether the unusual feature is genuinely mint-made. Perhaps one of the most exciting possibilities is a wrong planchet error. This occurs when a design intended for one coin is accidentally struck onto a blank intended for another denomination or coin type. A 1984 P quarter with this kind of error could have an unusual weight, diameter, thickness, edge, or metal composition. If your quarter seems unusually light or heavy, that may justify further investigation, but weight alone does not prove a wrong planchet error. Scales can be inaccurate, dirt can affect measurements, and damage or corrosion can change a coin's characteristics. Serious collectors use accurate equipment and compare measurements against reliable specifications. The edge of the quarter can also reveal clues. Collectors may look for unusual reading, abnormal edge exposure, distorted edges, or other characteristics associated with collar-related mistakes. A partial collar error can happen when the collar does not properly surround the planchet during striking, producing a distinctive raised or stepped appearance. Such an error can be particularly interesting because the shape of the coin itself can help explain what happened during production. Condition also plays an important role in determining collector interest. A heavily circulated 1984 P quarter may have scratches, dents, worn details, discoloration, and flattened surfaces, while an exceptionally preserved example may retain strong original luster and sharper details. When a genuine error is combined with excellent condition, the coin can become significantly more desirable than a similar error in poor condition. However, condition alone does not make a normal quarter worth millions. Rarity, authenticity, error type, preservation, demand, and documented sales all work together to determine collectible value. It is also important to remember that unusual color does not automatically indicate a valuable error. Environmental exposure, chemicals, heat, cleaning, and other post-mint factors can change the appearance of a coin. Likewise, a bent, scratched, flattened, or damaged quarter may look spectacular but still have little numismatic value if the alteration happened after the coin left the mint. This distinction between mint errors and post-mint damage is one of the most important lessons for anyone searching for valuable coins. If you have a 1984 P quarter, start by examining the date and mint mark, then look carefully at both sides under good lighting. Study the lettering, numbers, portrait, eagle, rim, edge, and overall shape. Compare your coin with a normal 1984 P quarter and look for differences that appear consistent with a minting event. If possible, use an accurate digital scale and proper measuring tools, but do not rely on a single measurement as proof. Most importantly, never clean, polish, scratch, bend, or chemically treat a potentially valuable coin. Altering the surface can reduce its collector appeal and destroy evidence that could help an expert determine what happened. If you discover a genuinely unusual characteristic, professional authentication or grading from a reputable numismatic service can provide much stronger evidence than an internet claim. This is particularly important when a coin is said to be worth $140 million. An online listing with a giant price does not prove that the coin has that market value. Asking prices and completed sales are completely different things, and an extraordinary valuation would require extraordinary documentation. The exciting part of the 1984 P quarter story is therefore not the assumption that every example is a multi-million-dollar treasure, but the possibility that an individual coin could contain an authentic and unusual mint error worth investigating. Imagine finding a quarter with a dramatic off-center strike where the date remains visible, a genuine double die characteristic, a major die crack, a spectacular clipped planchet, an obvious broad strike, a strong double strike, or an authentic wrong planchet error. Each discovery would reveal something about the complicated process used to transform a blank piece of metal into a finished coin. Millions of quarters can look nearly identical, but a rare production mistake can create an individual coin with a completely different story. That is why collectors spend hours examining old jars, inherited collections, bank rolls, and boxes of loose change. They are not expecting every coin to be valuable, they are looking for the unusual example that deserves closer attention. The 1984 P quarter reminds us that knowledge is more important than hype. Instead of believing every claim about a fortune hidden in pocket change, learn how genuine errors are created, understand the difference between damage and mint mistakes, and use evidence to determine whether a coin deserves professional attention. If your quarter is ordinary, you have still learned something useful about American coinage. If it contains a genuine error, you may have found a fascinating collectible with a story that makes it far more